Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. I am trying to figure out this mic to save my life. Okay, all right. So here we go. Here we go. Um, we are on day 9 and the end of shadow work. So, yeah, let's just do a quick recap. Good morning, Sammy, which is my co-host during shadow work. But yeah, let's do a quick recap. Okay, so. The shadow self is composed of both positive and negative aspects of who you are, right? It's the light and the dark. So, the benefits of shadow work is hard and uncomfortable work, which is why the benefits of shadow work are valuable and a good return for your effort. So, it's a very good return on your investment. All right. Day 2 was the shadow shows itself. And this was talking about how those parts of us we might see in other people. And it's kind of like, well, I don't appreciate that. But it's also because you're sitting there thinking, wow, why can't I just be open and free like that? Because you don't want to be, right? What is shadow work? Benefits of shadow work, more benefits of shadow work. How to do it. We went through 1, 2, 3, and 4, which was recognizing and owning it. And then now, then we did the exercise yesterday about writing 5 positive aspects and 5 negative aspects. Ooh, I cannot talk today. And here we are, the shadow work recap. The shadow work recap. First and foremost, thank you, Sammy, for being on during this series. It's been exciting. I don't know what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, but whatever it is, it'll be fun. I hope. I don't know. It's Self Care Wednesday, so I'll try to make it a little interesting and a little exciting. All right. So, um, shadow work recap. Key points. The shadow is the repressed parts of ourselves that we find unpleasant or cannot tolerate acknowledging. It is the nature of our shadows that we cannot see them clearly. And shadow work is the unification of who we consciously are with the parts of ourselves that we repress. So we want to unify these shadow bits, okay, with our light, with we have the light and the shadow. And there's nothing wrong with having both. Okay, we're going to have shadows, whether you've had, sorry guys, whether you've had a trauma or not. Okay, and hopefully you haven't. But whether you've had one or not, we do have shadow sides because guess what? We're all human. We all go through stuff, and as we go through things, we develop new feelings. We develop new experiences, whether it's, a job loss or you didn't get the job you wanted or, a personal loss, like maybe a relationship ended or a friend moved away or, maybe you're moving away, maybe you're going to college or you got a job that took you somewhere else. And I mean, it may not feel like it's a reason to grieve, but these are changes and not all of us are good with changes, right? Some of us struggle with it. And as Sammy said the other day, the one thing that stays consistent, it's that everything changes. Everything changes. Nothing stays the same. I mean, look at it this way. You change your clothes, right? Now these are small examples. You change your shoes, you change your socks, you change your underwear, you change your purse, you change your wallet, you change your watch. And you might think, yeah, that's no big deal, but it is. Say you have 4 watches, right? Oh, which one am I going to wear today? I'm going to wear this one. That's change. But it's change on such a small level and it's change in a place and in a way that you're so used to that you don't notice it. But when big changes happen, it feels like it upends us and we're just kind of like, "Oh my god." And that's been one of the most difficult things for me is change. And even with the shadow work, that I've done in the past, change has been hard. My last round of therapy I was in, that was the longest therapy I've ever been in, almost 18 months. And she ended up graduating me last summer. And and it was difficult because a lot of what I talked about in therapy was how hard change was for me. And then all of a sudden I had this change again. But it felt different this time because even I knew this time that it was like, nope, I'm done. I'm done. But I was afraid to let go because of change. If you've ever watched The Big Bang Theory, the second to the very last episode of the series, they talk about change because there's a character in there who, you know, I'm not sure that they consciously resist change, but everything is so regimented, everything is so perfect that they don't realize, and everyone kind of makes their transition into change so smooth that when a bunch of big changes happen all at once, it upends him. And he's just kind of like, oh my God, what do I do? And we get that way. We can get that way. And so this is why shadow work is so important, because the shadow, it's not just about balancing our light and dark. The shadow is also teaching us that change is consistent. It's reminding us, don't trigger, don't knee jerk, find a way to change the behavior, find a healthier way to deal with something. Don't just stick with the old patterns because the old patterns aren't working, right? That's why you're watching this. That's why we're doing the shadow work. That's why we went through an entire 21 days or a business calendar month of self-love, because we want that change. We want to embrace that change. But one of the things that we find to be the struggle is the change itself. So once we start to realize that, everything we do changes from day to day, we can look at big change differently. I'm learning this as I'm talking to you guys because, change has still been very difficult for me. And yet I realize that how much I have changed since we just started this a week ago. You know, um, I'm finding better ways to deal with things. I've still triggered and I've still knee jerked a little bit, and it was just kind of like, whoop, but I caught myself quickly. In fact, I'll give you an example of how the shadow work has taught me how to check in with myself. So we're going to head into TMI territory. So I am like straight out PMSing right now. All right. My cycle's going to start in a few days. And the reason I'm telling you this is because when a woman goes through her cycle, if you're not, if you don't know, which you should, I don't care, if you live with a woman or a woman, you should understand, that when we're, having our moments, it's probably, but you know what? Don't sit there and say, oh, is it that time of the month? I hate when people do that to me. It's like, I remember one time someone did that to me and it wasn't. And I'm like, no, you're just irritating. And I felt bad for saying that. But it was like, really? You're sitting here pushing every button and then you're asking me if it's my time of the month? No, you should ask me if I'm hungry, which I probably was. I don't know. When my blood sugar gets low, I get mean or crazy, one of the two. And I mean crazy like, woohoo, it's I got to work on that too. So, but you know, um last night or yesterday, I was thinking, oh yeah, see, even Sammy, oh my God, isn't that the most annoying comment? It is, it is. Or when they say, do you need to eat? Which I understand because, I mean, generally when I get cranky, it's because I am hungry, and because I haven't, sometimes I just forget to eat, and most times it's okay. And I'll ride the tide, but then, like just one thing can just be like poof. And that's kind of what, shadow work is. But what I realized the other night is I was like, I think it was Saturday night. I was kind of sitting there and I'm all, it was Sunday night. And I'm like, I feel like I have a mood coming on. And I said, okay, let's break this down. Instead of just ignoring it and just kind of falling into that depression, I because of shadow work, I'm paying more attention to my shadow and its needs. And I kept thinking, what, why am I feeling this way? I don't, is it just, you know, uh, a moment, or is it driven by something? And then I remembered, oh, I'm PMSing. I'm PMSing. And so my influx of hormones is kind of upending my mental state, because it's just, there's a lot of feelings that come with extra hormones, and then so everything feels a little bit more amplified. And like if you highlight something on a page, it feels like it's been lit by the brightest highlighter ever. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's it. And then after I realized that, I wrote it in my journal, and I was just sitting there kind of like, oh, okay, So it's nothing. I mean, it's something, but it's nothing. It's nothing I need to worry about. It's just I need to monitor it. But the shadow work has taught me that. The shadow work has taught me to stop and think about it before I, give it a real label, before I just slap a label on it and say, okay, you're done for the day. No, it turned out to be just what it was. And I also know that after it's done, after my cycle is through, that the hormones are going to change again back to their own little whatever happy go lucky for the next 28 days. And and that can also upend somebody, especially if you have a chemical imbalance. So it's just, I felt it this time though, because I'm really, really zeroing in on the shadow work this time. It's not that I didn't do a lot of work before. It's just I did a lot of big work when I started. Then I did this series again, and I started to do the cleanup, right? Now it's just kind of like, instead of, like fixing, or instead of healing all the big shadow stuff and then kind of dusting up, to make the house of shadow, presentable. Now it's just kind of like, clean up on aisle five, clean up on aisle five. Let's, it's just something small and minute that needs to be given attention. And I'm not saying that what it is small or minute in anybody's eyes. What I'm saying is that for me, considering all the shadow work I've done, this is kind of just like, again, like that cleanup, like there's a spill on aisle five. Okay, go clean up the spill on aisle five. Go put a caution, do not walk over this, 5 drops of water thing. Because in reality, if we let that get away from us, we will slip and fall. We'll do that nice little somersault right onto our ass. And we don't know who we're going to take out with us if there's other people around. So, doing the shadow work, it's hard, it's scary. Like I said at the very, very beginning of this, make sure you have someone you trust. If you don't want to seek professional help, which I really do recommend if it's possible for you. And here's the thing with therapists. We get a therapist and people like, well, I don't really like my therapist, but because we don't want to go through all the intake and stuff, right? And I get it. I get it. But if you're not gelling with your therapist, you have every right to change. And any therapist will tell you that. Any therapist will say, well, if you don't think I'm doing well enough with you, then my therapist even told me that once at the beginning, because I think she sensed that I was a little nervous around it. Because, like I said, she reminded me of my mom. Just kind of like, just very matter of fact. Just, no I mean, there was a sort of filter. I'm not trying to paint my mom as a bad picture, but just, basically, my mom was the kind of person that would tell you what you needed to know, not what you wanted to hear. And when I was growing up, that felt pretty harsh. But as I became an adult, I realized that was what I needed. It was what I needed. It was just, my dad did the same thing, but my dad was a little bit more gentle with it. So, but that's just how my mom was raised. So when you start to understand, where they're coming from, and maybe the traumas in their own life or whatever, you start to realize that everybody has something they're carrying. Everyone has baggage, and sometimes when it goes unchecked, the baggage gets dropped on your head. Speaking of dropped on your head, I'm going to sidetrack here for a second. My dad and I don't know what brought it up, but we started talking about we were watching Bones, and we started talking about Wile E. Coyote. And I Wile E. Coyote could have really used a dose of self love. That poor coyote was so hungry. And the Roadrunner, I told my dad, I said, when I was a kid, I used to think, wow, good for you, Roadrunner, good for you. And then when I got older and started watching the cartoons again, this is how perspective changes. I was like, what an asshole. I mean, like the Roadrunner was literally just an asshole, and he gloated all the, or he, I don't know, is that a word, gloated? He would gloat all the time. And that poor coyote, an anvil on the head, blown up by the Acme missile. I mean, you shouldn't go, you shouldn't be cheering on. He's just hungry. He wants to eat, but and it made for good comedy. But when you really break that down, in a way, that's shadow work, right? It's kind of like the Wile E. Coyote is the light side of you, and the Roadrunner is just going neener neener, no, me. and just doing that and running off, and you're trying to chase it and you're trying to track it down, and sometimes it feels like it's that hard. Sometimes you feel like you're, you know, see, even Sammy, the Roadrunner, was a bit of a jerk. She's being polite, okay? The Roadrunner was, hmm. I stand by what I said. I do. I stand by what I said. Kind of like Tweety Bird, right? But Sylvester was kind of a goofball anyway. But anyways, before I super lose myself in Looney Tunes, um, you know, sometimes we do go Looney Tunes when we're trying to fix our shadow. So, it kind of, I'm gonna see how I made that fit though. See how I made that fit? It really is like chasing our own shadow, because, and it feels unattainable. But in reality, and in our fantasies of the Wile E. Coyote catching the Roadrunner, we can catch our shadow, and we can, you know, give it the love and kindness and tenderness that it needs to heal. It talked about here, the shadow is the repressed parts of ourselves that we find unpleasant or cannot tolerate acknowledging. This is why it says it's going to be uncomfortable. But it said right here, shadow work is hard and uncomfortable, which is why the benefits of shadow work are valuable, a good return for your effort. Um, it is the best investment you are ever going to give yourself. If you need to do shadow work, if you need to, if you have a very unbalanced, if you're if your shadow and light are not balanced, um, because it can be unpleasant. It can be those parts of us that we don't like. I've shared a lot about the shadow side of me, and um, Mount Shelsuvius, right? How she'd just go poof, and it would kind of just spray everyone around me. And I'm not proud of those moments. Um, I'm not ashamed of them anymore, because I did the shadow work and I realized that a lot of that was coming from a place of repressed parts of myself that were unpleasant and that I couldn't tolerate acknowledging. And once I found the courage to do that, once I found the courage to face what it was that I didn't want to face anymore, or that I never thought I'd have to face again, it was kind of like, I'm gonna go nerdy geek on you right now. In the Justice League, when they're facing, oh, I forgot his name. Um, well, he was the bad guy. But anyways, when they were facing him, um, Wonder Woman just, her sword's on the ground. She just kind of steps on it, flips it up, grabs it, and is like, okay, let's do this. And it's kind of like, that's one of my favorite gifts, because when I'm feeling good about myself, that's how I feel. I feel like, yeah, like Wonder Woman, you know? And it's just, I think it's a benefit for us. It's going to be scary. It's going to be hard. Think of your shadow, if you are a geek like me, or a nerd, whatever we're called. Uh, if you are, think of it as like a superhero movie. Your shadow is going up against this bad thing that's trying to take over the world, or trying to, that's just corrupt and awful and horrible. And, you have to be the champion of your own story. And if we can't figure out how to be the champion of our own story, we're going to struggle, and we're going to continually take it out on other people, or we're going to take it out on ourselves, which, is just as bad, if not worse, because it can get bad. It can get, sorry guys, my ear is so itchy. I feel like, there's just somebody whispering in my ear, and it's just like, you get those little tingles when the wind blows. So, sorry. But anyways, yeah, so when we face the repressed parts of ourselves that we do find unpleasant, and we, can't tolerate acknowledging, um, we're showing it who's boss. We're saying, hey, you know what? I'm worth healing. I am enough. And if I want to move into a place where I am happy and not just phoning it in or doing the fake it till you make it, I have to do this. That was a lot of my thinking. I had to do this. I didn't have a choice anymore. There was no other choice. My back was up against the wall, and I realized I owed it to myself to be brave enough to heal this. And it was hard. I'm not going to lie, it was hard, and I did this without therapy. I My first round of shadow work probably was in therapy, that long 6 months of intensive therapy I told you about. But when I recognized it as shadow work, I had sibling help me through it. I was just like, you know what, this is going to get brutal, so if you could just be there for me. Even if you're just holding space for someone, you don't have to say anything. You can just be there with them. But like I said, if you're going to do shadow work and you opt out of therapy, please, please, please have somebody you trust, somebody that will not judge what you're going through, and it doesn't mean you have to tell them everything, but just someone that will sit there and hold space with you. Okay, maybe even find some, if you're religious, go to church. Maybe lean in on confession or something. Whatever it is that you can do. And there are people you can talk to. Your pastor, your priest, your reverend, a nun. These are all my experiences. I don't, whatever everybody else has in their own. Sammy was telling me about her church yesterday. It was amazing. I mean, that's the kind of place where you go to find people to hold space with. But not everybody lives in Georgia, so you know. But I know that if I needed to, I could reach out to her and you know, just know she's there. So I'm very fortunate to have a very good and very strong support group. And I do hope that they all know that I am also here for them. I haven't been very good at it in the last 5 years. I've kind of just been, like I said, in a spiral, going down a hole, and I hit bottom and kept digging. And now I am slowly finding my way back into the light. And I shamed myself for how long that took. And then I realized, you know what? It is what it is. And maybe or maybe I just had to go through that. Thank you, Sammy. Sammy says she's always here. I appreciate you. So, it is the nature of our shadows that we cannot see them clearly. Your shadow is always going to hide from you, right? Because, it's, again, the part of you that's repressed that you don't want to acknowledge. So, you have to figure out how to catch your shadow. Kind of like Peter Pan, right? You had to sew his shadow onto him. So you have to, sew your shadow onto you and then heal it. And it's not as easy as it sounds. And you know what? Actually, if you want me to be 100% honest with you, it's not as hard as we make it seem. If you are willing to be brave enough to face the parts of you that you have repressed and could not tolerate acknowledging, and you face it with the courage and the bravery of, a kitten up against a dog. I just say that because some dogs are so cute. Like the cat will be like, hiss, hiss, in these cute videos, and the dog just like, you're so cute. But I mean, that's how it feels sometimes, right? That you're up against the biggest thing in the world. Remember, you are in control. You are allowed to say, that's enough for today. You are allowed to say, I'm starting to go down this rabbit hole that I better not go down. I need to stop for right now and I'll pick this back up later. You are in complete control. And that is the one thing that, even though we need to let go of control, this is the one time when it is okay to be in control of this. It's not bad to have control over certain things. We just cannot believe that we control everything in our lives. But our healing we do control. So it's going to be hard and it's going to be uncomfortable. And it's hard because it is uncomfortable. But again, if you face it like a champ, even if you don't feel like one, right? If you walk in like, that person that's left and they have to pick up the sword and then they end up being the hero of the story, but because they finally realized they had all this stuff inside of them, be that person for yourself. Be your hero. Be the person that picks up the sword for you and fights for yourself. Don't let the shadow take over you. You are in charge of your shadow. You are in charge of your light. It is your light and your shadow. And if you do those things and you really monitor how you're doing during all the work that you're doing, um you are going to come out on top, with minimal wounds, and you're going to feel like a champ. Now, if you're like me and you find every hard way to do it, that's also not a bad thing. That was the path I had to take. And maybe it was the path I had to take so that I can share with you to not make it so hard, to not, sit there and just be like, again, Lilo on the floor, just like, oh, I mean, that's how I feel sometimes, just like, oh. just, like I feel so defeated sometimes. And you might feel that way. No matter how brave and how strong you are, you might feel defeated sometimes. And that's okay. Because what matters is that you get back up and you keep fighting for yourself. You keep fighting for yourself. I will fight for mental health awareness and to end that stigma for as long as I live. And if you don't have a dinged up mental health, I will still preach it because people need to understand it. People need to understand what it's like. My dad and I were watching Lord of the Rings last week, and Gollum slash Smeagol. I told him, I said, when he starts really talking to himself a lot in Return of the King, and was it Return of the King? Well, I don't know. When he really starts having his like kind of schizophrenic moments where he's like talking to himself, but also like he's Gollum and Smeagol. I told my dad, I said, if you ever wondered what depression's like, that's it. And I said, Gollum is that voice inside of our head that keeps telling us negative things, while Smeagol is the one saying, no, no, you know what? This is how it should be because they're great, and blah, blah, blah. And then we have that voice in our head just going, no, you are wrong. So that's how it is. That is how it is. At least in my experience. I don't know about other people's experience, but it's that voice in the head, right? That voice inside of us that's so negative. And that's our shadow. That's our shadow. Gollum was the shadow of Smeagol, if you've seen the movies. And, and or read the book, which I've done both. But yeah, he is the shadow of Smeagol. And that's what happens when you go unchecked, right? When you let other things just consume your thoughts that aren't as important as healing yourself. And the last one, shadow work is the unification of who we consciously are with the parts of ourselves that we repress. That's the healing part. So I'm not going to add any more to that. I've said enough, but that's the healing part. When we are brave enough, even if you don't feel like you're brave enough, do it anyways, right? What was the quote I said last week from the actor? Feel the fear, give it a little home, and then do it anyway, right? Feel the fear, give it a little home, and then do it anyway. I mean, that's great. That's great. Like I said, I didn't even hear it. I saw somebody post it, and I was like, that is like the greatest thing ever. And I'll be honest with you, it really helped me through my shadow work. I put it at the beginning, I think, of one of my books, which I burned most of those books. And I didn't burn it because I wanted to get rid of it. It was my release. It was my release. That was how I released it. And also, when you burn 500 pages, you should probably do it separately because damn. But I did it in the barbecue, so I was safe. I was safe. But boy, I saw the temperature go up on that bad boy. I sent it to hell. So, but no, seriously, it's a burn ritual. And when I say burn ritual, I don't mean it's like, anything mysterious. It's just, therapists do recommend that. And same with, the metaphysical aspect of things, So for me, it was both. It was a metaphysical aspect and it was a psychology thing because you're getting rid of it. You're sending it to ashes. It's like the funeral pyre, right? I mean, if I could have shot an arrow into it, I would have. You know what? I have a friend. I know I'm veering off again, but I have a friend because I am sincerely claustrophobic. And the one thing I cannot stand is the thought of me in a coffin. And the other thing I cannot stand is the thought of going into one of those crematorium things. It just freaks me out to think about it, right? Like, oh my God, it's like my body's being burned. And I know I'm dead. I know I would be dead when this happens. But I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, when I die, I said, I just want someone to push me off into a boat and shoot an arrow into it. And I actually saw that. I can't remember what the movie was. It was a great movie from a long time ago with Macaulay Culkin and, oh God, was it Burt Lancaster that played the grandpa? Whatever it was, but they wanted to give him a Viking funeral because that's what the grandpa wanted, and that's what I want. And my friend's like, oh my God, that's what I want. And kind of for the same reason. It's just kind of like, you know what? Just secretly push me out into a boat in the middle of the ocean and set me on fire, okay? Because that will make me feel better. I won't be in a box and I won't be in some weird, like just flame throwing thing that melts me. So, and yeah, Sammy says burn rituals are so helpful. They really are, and, you can do whatever you want. And please, 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 if you live in a high fire area like I do, burn it safely. All right, burn it safely. And it doesn't have to be the whole book. You can just write down your shadow stuff and just burn it and bury it. For some plants, ashes are a good thing. So, but anyways, I've been all over the board again today. I could talk for hours. I know it's a gift. I'm not sure if it's a gift that other people appreciate, but it's a gift. but bum. Yeah, no, but sorry, I lost my thought. Um, okay, all right. Ooh, woo, Shelly Marie, come back to Earth. Uh, yeah. I don't think I have actually. I don't think I have anything more to say on the subject. To be perfectly honest, I think we've covered everything. I've shared everything I possibly can. That makes me look like the most horrible person in on the planet. But I'm going to tell you why I share that. Because if you were watching this and you were watching it from just the part where I started giggling, you would have no idea how messed up I used to be. I mean, how seriously messed up I used to be. I didn't start emotionally eating because, I love food. Well, I do love food. That's part of the problem. But I mean, that's probably a bad example. I didn't start emotionally eating because there was no emotions. I was feeding my emotions. I was feeding the hole inside of me. I was feeding all the bits of me, and then I fed the parts of me that were afraid, and then I fed the parts of me that were angry, and then somewhere along the line, I started feeding the parts that felt like victory, like I was victorious. I'm literally an recovering emotional eater. I know that sounds silly, and people will be like, you can't compare it, but believe it or not, emotional eating is, according to my 6 months of intensive therapy therapist, who has also dealt with eating disorders, it is a legitimate eating disorder. I know, just one thing to add to my resume of the things of Shelley Marie. But I used to be ashamed of that. I'm not anymore. I might even talk about emotional eating because I do know when it started. And it did not start with my childhood trauma. It started later in life with another trauma that I had to deal with. And I did promise about talking about taboo subjects. I'm gonna start covering some things. Like all kinds of things. We're gonna talk about sex. We're gonna talk about masturbation. We're gonna talk about abortions and the rights that women should have for their bodies. We're going to talk about, what else did I write down? uh our periods, disassociation during sex, the naked body. So, and it's not that I want to be controversial, but I'm so tired of these being taboo subjects. We're going to talk about mental health as well, and body positivity, because for some reason those are taboo as well. And to be honest with you, for people who sit there and poo poo people who are plus size, there's some shadow work seriously that needs to be done there. Okay. Why are you so afraid of it? Like on Bones, right? One of the he's in therapy now, and the therapist, oh, and I love Stephen Fry. I do, and he's the current therapist. My dad's so funny. I mean, talk about spoiler alerts, right? But apparently there's going to be someone who's a little bit more permanent on the show. But Stephen Fry is the first therapist that Booth has to go and see. And he's like, well, why do you, like, so what happens is in the show, a rich guy dies, but he dies because of a kid who was at risk and from a poor neighborhood. And he's like, well, why are you so intent on solving the poor kid's murder, but not the rich guy? And, and Booth just has this hang up about wealthy people. And that's a shadow thing. That is a shadow thing, And so, as an example, yeah, see, Sammy says we're going to get into some good stuff. We are. And I thank you for being on here because she has got some really good insights. I love the comments. Guys, if you want to participate in these things, I'm not smart enough to figure out how to add people onto this, but I do read the comments, the live comments. Oh, my dad's phone ringing. I do read the live comments on this. So, let's talk about it, right? But tomorrow is going to be self-care. So tomorrow we're going to focus on self-care, and I'm going to try to come up with some stuff over the next couple of days to get us through the rest of this month. And then we'll wing it come May. All right. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Sammy, thank you again for co-hosting. I love you, Muddy. But I do. She really is a sister from another mister. Yeah, I'm so grateful for her. I am so, so grateful for her. So anyways, enough gushing. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back here tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live. All lives are public under Shelley Marie Lucas. Anybody can watch. And yeah, you can find me across the board on social media, all the same things too. So, all right. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks, Sammy. I love you too.